Good morning, you're watching The Mint, I'm Andy Hodges. In our main story this morning, board members from the African Development Bank are currently in Zimbabwe for a week-long information mission to assess how the government of Zimbabwe is addressing key economic issues and also to tour projects funded by the AFDB throughout the country. The Mint spoke to Zimbabwe's Minister of Finance, Professor Ntuli Ncube, and Head of Delegation of the AFDB visiting Zimbabwe, Mr. Umbuyamu Matungulu.
There's a visit delegation of the board, some of the board members of the African Development Bank, and E.D. Katungula here represents that group which is here today. In fact, they're here for the whole week, and really we've received very good support from the bank in terms of resources that cut across sectors, looking at roads, looking at irrigation infrastructure, looking at the social sector in terms of social protection. The FDB has been very supportive of the social protection front. They gave us quite a sizable chunk of resources to support the Cyclone Idai victims and the reconstruction of the whole area. So we're very pleased so far with the support that we've received from the bank. As always, they are our all-weather friend.
This is an information mission. We at the board decide on some of the key operations, including the ones that are destined to support reforms here in Zimbabwe. We thought it was important for us to come and see how the authorities are addressing the critical issues that they're confronted with in trying to establish macroeconomic stability, improving the overall business environment so that investment could do better. And I have to say that we've been impressed by the presentation that was made by the minister and his team. To us, what is really key to our interventions is first the level of commitment by the authorities themselves to the reforms that they're putting in place. And I think we had today the opportunity to feel the government's commitment in on that front, and we are pleased with the work that they're doing. We look forward to continuing good relations between Zimbabwe and the African Development Bank.
One project that the ADB delegation may likely visit is the Bulawayo Water and Sewage Services Improvement Project, BWSSIP, a $33 million ADB-funded project which is on course to rehabilitate and upgrade water production treatment facilities, water distribution, sewer drainage networks, and wastewater treatment disposal facilities in the southwestern part of the city. Safe water access and cleaner waste collection are set to become a reality for vulnerable communities in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, as the bank-funded water and sewage improvement project enters its final phase. The project is expected to be completed by the third quarter of 2020. Mr. Dalmoni Kitabire, country manager for ADB Zimbabwe office, said, "We seek to reverse the devastating effects that poor sanitation and water supply has brought to this area. We look forward to witnessing the positive impacts that these changes will bring and building the resilience of this society." Bulawayo, like many urban centers in Zimbabwe, has been affected by years of underinvestment in its water and sewage infrastructure maintenance. The city also suffers from water insecurity due to frequent drought. Less than 50% of the sewage generated in the city is currently collected, and the exposure to contamination is significant. The project, administered by the government of Zimbabwe via the Bulawayo City Council, is designed to contribute to the health and social well-being of its population. Engineer Simela Dube, Director Engineering Services for the Bulawayo City Council, said, "Before the project, water was distributed on a ration basis, forcing marginal communities in Chowdhury Park, an informal settlement in Bulawayo district, to walk for over a kilometre to get water. Since the project's inception in 2015, 4 pumps have been replaced and 141 kilometres of network in Magwegwe and Criterion reservoir areas rehabilitated. Similarly, water mains have been upgraded, renewed, and in some cases replaced. Environmental improvements include rehabilitating 2 wastewater treatment facilities and replacing 18 kilometres of sewer lines. Around 9,000 homes are expected to gain access to clean water. In addition, nearly 2,000 municipal staff have been trained, 30% of them women, to address the lack of skills to efficiently manage water and sewer service delivery systems, and several interns afforded an opportunity to hone new skills through engagement on various segments of the project. Training was provided on the environment, water services, gender and health. Supporting the rehabilitation of water and sanitation in Zimbabwe has been one of the ADB's priority areas since the cholera epidemic in 2008-2009. The BWSSIP is an extension of the bank's efforts to stabilize and improve water supply and sanitation sanitation services in Zimbabwe. Without adequate financing, the city was suffering from inadequate and dilapidated water and sanitation infrastructure, including inefficient and old pumps and treatment works, non-functional sewer systems, and frequent instances of contaminated pipe water. The BWSSIP is only one of many projects that the African Development Bank is funding within Zimbabwe and fits into the ADB's overarching objective, which is to spur sustainable economic development and social progress in its regional member countries, thus contributing to poverty reduction. FuseNet, the Famine Early Warning Systems Network, is a leading provider of early warning and analysis on acute food insecurity. Created in 1985 by the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, after devastating famines in East and West Africa, FuseNet provides objective, evidence-based analysis to help government decision-makers and relief agencies plan for and respond to humanitarian crises. In a report issued titled Zimbabwe Food Security Outlook, October 2019 to May 2020, FuseNet stated that poor harvests and increasing economic hardships lead to high humanitarian assistance needs. The report continues, following the 2018-2019 drought, crop production was well below average, and the country is faced with a 2019-2020 national cereal deficit estimated at over 800,000 metric tons. The 2019-2020 rainfall season is forecast to be below average, characterized by a late start and erratic rainfall. This, combined with the anticipated widespread poor access to agricultural inputs, will likely lead to below average cropped area. A second consecutive below average season is expected to result in lower than normal livelihood opportunities, household incomes, and 2020 harvest, driving atypically high assistance needs. In addition to the very poor macroeconomic conditions, poor 2018-2019 harvests are also driving lower than normal maize production, officially estimated at 777,000 metric tons, which was 54% below last year and 41% below the 5-year average. Food consumption patterns in most parts of the country remain poor and continue to worsen. Due to the below-average harvest, most poor households across the country have already depleted their own produced foods and faced high and increasing food prices to access market food. As a result, these households are employing consumption coping strategies, including reducing the number of meals consumed and decreasing portion sizes, and preferential feeding of children ahead of adults, among other issues. The October 2019 to May 2020 most likely scenario is based on the following national level assumptions. The macroeconomic conditions are expected to remain volatile and further deteriorate throughout the outlook period as critical markets persist. As a result, parallel market exchange rates are anticipated to remain above the official interbank market rates and drive further price increases and multiple pricing on the markets. Power shortages and increasing fuel and transport costs are also likely to persist. Following the lifting of the 3-year maize import ban in early October last year, it is expected that the government and private sector will import maize from mainly international sources, as typical regional sources are also experiencing deficits. However, critical foreign currency shortages are likely to limit imports. Consequently, the annual national cereal gap, estimated at over 800,000 metric tons, is not expected to be fulfilled. Markets across the country are expected to be undersupplied with grain through the end of the marketing season. The Grain Marketing Board is expected to serve as the main source of grain, especially in deficit areas. However, stock shortages are expected to continue. Maize grain prices are expected to remain above average due to very low supply, high demand, and likely continued depreciation of the Zimbabwe dollar. Maize meal prices and other staples are expected to be above average as commercial millers import their own maize supplies, and power shortages and increasing fuel and transport costs are also likely to exert upward pressure on staple food prices. Anticipated above average and increasing prices of basic commodities and services are expected to continue to impact livelihoods for all wealth groups, and most severely for very poor and poor households. Pasture and water availability for livestock are likely to remain lower than normal throughout the projection period. Furthermore, due to below average access to agricultural inputs and poor start to the 2019-20 season, area planted for crops is expected to be below average. Fall armyworm, FAW, among other pests and diseases, is likely to negatively impact crop production. As a result, the 2020 green and main harvest anticipated to start in April are most likely to be below average. Cattle conditions through December are expected to be poor to very poor in arid areas. Although livestock conditions will also be poor in typical high rainfall areas, this is expected to a lesser extent due to some pasture availability in these areas. Cattle deaths are expected to be atypically high. Livestock conditions are expected to marginally improve with the start of the rainfall season, in November, December last year. Incomes from both agricultural and non-agricultural labor are expected to remain below average throughout the projection period. This is based on anticipated limited opportunities for in-kind and cash payments and the expectation for another below-average rainfall season. Cash crop production, mainly tobacco and cotton, are also expected at below average levels due to anticipated reduction in cropped areas, prospects of a poor rainfall season, and the challenging economic environment. Most likely food security outcomes are that acute food insecurity outcomes are likely to remain somewhat stable in semi-arid areas, likely to receive humanitarian food assistance. However, crisis, that's IPC Phase 3, outcomes are expected to persist across much of the country as the situation continues to deteriorate from October last year through to the peak of the lean season in March-April 2020. Throughout the projection period, areas of greatest concern include Kariba, Binga, Gokwe North, Imbire, Mudzi, and Chipinge, where there would likely be some households in emergency during the peak of the lean season. In areas where crisis IPC Phase 3 outcomes are expected to persist, poor households have already been relying on earlier than normal purchases, though they will face high food prices restricting their ability to purchase sufficient food to meet their basic food needs. These households are expected to engage again in a variety of coping strategies till the harvest, likely in April. These strategies include limiting meal frequency and quantity, increased consumption of wild foods, extended sale of livestock, labor migration, and decreasing expenses on healthcare, veterinary care, and agricultural inputs. The national prevalence of acute malnutrition is expected to increase beyond both the average and current 3.6%, especially between February and March 2020. The green harvest in March-April, that's green mealies, pumpkins, fresh ground nuts, etc., is likely to be below average, especially in typical marginal production areas. The main harvest, anticipated to start in April, will also likely be below average. The government of Zimbabwe has recently introduced a coupon system for distributing food to vulnerable members of society, which is said to be implemented soon. Zimbabwe's Minister of Finance, Professor Ngube, had this to say.
Always work better if they are targeted. If the person who's vulnerable are identified and they receive that subsidy directly, that obviously cuts off all the abuse that's been associated with any subsidy. That's the first point. The second point is of course, we want some kind of voucher system that will, or targeted cash transfer system that will just do that, which is target the beneficiary. So the exact details of how we'll run this out are still being worked out. For a start, we need a very credible list of beneficiaries who can then be targeted. So that is still being put together. I mean, we've got a very good database, by the way, for the rural vulnerable, but a not so good database for the urban vulnerable. So that's what we're dealing with, the urban areas. But soon we'll announce the modalities as to how this targeted scheme is going to work. I think people must focus less on it being a coupon system. Often when you say coupon is associated with other things, we want just to make sure that it is simply a targeted system benefiting whoever needs to benefit.
Zimbabwe's government is very aware of the impending drought in the country, and it appears is already taking proactive steps to ensure food security for all its citizens. This ranges from food imports, international donor support, and drought proofing. What is clear is that the fate of a nation can no longer be based on good rainfalls, and unless the country wishes to face uncertainty in food supply year in and year out, it is time that effective strategies are put in place, and put in place now. The United Kingdom and the European Union will rip each other apart in negotiations over a new trade deal, the leading European minister has predicted. Jean-Yves Le Drian, the foreign minister in Emmanuel Macron's French government, said on Sunday that talks between Britain and the EU would turn nasty when the sides clash over contentious issues like fishing and EU rules. Le Drian told the Munich Security Conference, "I think that on trade issues or on the measures for our future relationship that we are going to discuss, we are going to rip each other apart." Talks between Britain and the EU are due to start next month. Both sides aim to reach some sort of agreement by the end of the year, when the 11-month Brexit transition period comes to an end. Several senior EU figures have expressed doubts that something can be agreed in such a short timetable. EU Trade Chief Phil Hogan said last month it was just not possible to negotiate a comprehensive free trade deal in that time. Trade deals with the EU usually take a number of years and also need to be ratified by EU institutions. Boris Johnson's UK government has promised that Britain will take back control of its waters as part of leaving the EU. However, EU countries like France are prioritising access to British waters as part of a new trade relationship. Macron's French government is set to take a particularly tough stance on fishing. The question of EU regulations in a variety of fields is a second potential flashpoint in negotiations. Brussels has warned Johnson that the UK must commit in writing to following EU rules on environmental standards and workers' rights in order to gain privileged access to its markets. The UK Prime Minister said in a speech last month that he would rather walk away without a trade deal than sign up to EU rules. Johnson's chief negotiator, David Frost, is expected to reiterate this message when he delivers a lecture at the Université Libre de Brussels in Belgium this week. French Minister Le Drian said on Sunday that he hoped the UK and EU would overcome the difference in opinion to negotiate a close relationship, telling the conference, "We must realize that we have common interests." Search engine giant Google will not continue with its free Wi-Fi offering Google Station a mere 3 months after its launch in South Africa. The free Wi-Fi service went online in 125 locations across Langa, KwaZulu, Gugulethu, Delft, Elsie's River and Philippi in Cape Town in November last year, reported IT Web. It forms part of Google's grand global initiative to offer fast, free, open access internet to people affected by high unemployment and crime rates in countries like Mexico, India and the Philippines. But Google won't continue its service in South Africa and will hand over operations to its partner, Think Wi-Fi, through 2020. While Google didn't give an exact reason for its decision, it said that it had to reevaluate its plans due to complex and varying technical requirements across countries and partners. Think Wi-Fi said it would continue the service in exactly the same way users have become accustomed to, in a statement to Tech Central. Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, who is the richest man in the world, announced in an Instagram post on Monday that he was donating $10 billion to combat climate change in a new initiative called the Bezos Earth Fund. And he said, "Today I'm thrilled to announce I'm launching the Bezos Earth Fund," the Amazon chief executive wrote in his announcement post, while also committing $10 billion to start. Bezo said he will begin issuing grants this year and that the new global initiative will make charitable donations funding scientists, activists, NGOs, any effort that offers a real possibility to help preserve and protect the natural world. The New Earth Fund is Bezos' largest philanthropic effort to date, though he's previously been criticized for how little he donates to charity compared to other billionaires. Bezos isn't exactly known for his past charitable efforts, but he's more recently increased his giving with a $2 billion in September 2018 aimed at helping homeless families and building a network of preschools. Bezos said, "Climate change is the biggest threat to our planet. I want to work alongside others both to amplify known ways and to explore new ways of fighting the devastating impact of climate change on this planet we all share." This isn't his first effort to take action against climate change. In September last year, amid pressure from employees, Bezos announced the Climate Pledge, in which he said Amazon would meet the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement and be carbon neutral by 2040. Amazon and Bezos have faced criticism in the past over sustainability and climate change policies. Amazon, which delivers over an estimated 1 billion packages per year, has subsequently been criticized for having a huge environmental footprint. Bezos is the world's richest man, as I said, with a net worth of $129.9 billion, according to Forbes. And Bezos' climate pledge of $10 billion amounts to nearly 10% of his overall net worth. He holds a 12% stake in Amazon, which he founded in 1994, as well as owns the Washington Post. You've been watching The Mint. I'm Andy Hodges. Please follow us on our Facebook page, Zen Papers TV Network, our website, ztn.co.zw, and on YouTube under ZTN. Your comments are welcome via our Twitter handle @ZTN News, and of course via Facebook. Join us here on The Mint every weekday morning at 6 a.m. Central African Time. Well, that's it for me this morning. Goodbye. Have a profitable business day, and you all be safe.